Hello, hello, this is Irene with SaugaTalks. Hello, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you. I'm speaking with fascinating people in tech, and please support the show, okay? We're working hard around here to bring the fantastic speakers, to speak about insights, to speak about strategies and realities and case studies and success stories and disasters, okay? And some leadership advice as well as, of course, technology insights. So today is my day. Brian Root is with me. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Beautiful, beautiful. Welcome to Soga Talks, all right? Because today we have an ambitious goal to cover, in my mind at least, all right? We said it's going to be AI mandate. That's a big term, all right? But to
Yep.
me, it means the big promise, and at the same time, what will be the tangible, okay, business value results out of a lot of AI initiatives we hear about, okay? So let's start somewhere. Okay, what do you think AI mandate is for executive, for C-suites, for leadership out there?
Yeah. I think it's a very common term that is being thrown around at a lot of particularly enterprise stage companies right now. And I think if you kind of take a little bit of a step back and look at what the term itself kind of literally means, it is basically you must use AI, right? And that is coming from either the board or the executive team themselves, but being pushed down to a lot of the people who are doing kind of the line level work at these companies. And I think it's interesting, just to start out with why is that even the case, right? Like it's very rare if you look back historically. We've had these things that are technologically very interesting. Like we've had Bitcoin, we've had AR, VR technology. I think it's been very, very rare and contained where companies have said you must use one of those things, right? Those have been adopted in much more purpose specific and maybe industry specific ways. So first of all, I think it's kind of unique to some extent that we just have this technological force that suddenly it's pretty much every company is like, oh, we have to use this thing. So that's kind of one aspect that I think is very interesting. The second is why is that the case? My read, I think, is that it's because a lot of companies are operating out of kind of fear to some extent, right? They're looking at their competitive set. They're looking at the expectations of their investors. They're looking at just, frankly, what's trendy and saying, oh, we have to jump on that. And one of the things that was really interesting to me, if I think back 2 years ago, right, when ChatGPT came out and kind of changed everybody's lives for better or worse, about like 3 or so months after it came out, I recall talking to the very senior most executive leadership at the company that I was at that time, and the CTO effectively said pretty much verbatim, we are 6 months behind our competition on this. I was like, it just came out 3 months ago. How could we possibly be 6 months behind, right? That's something that I've heard, though, consistently from not just that company and that individual, but a lot of leaders at a lot of companies subsequently in my fractional work, right? So I think there's just this hype wave that has surrounded AI that is causing all of this, fear of missing out almost at a very executive level, even at the biggest companies. So what you're left with is just kind of, again, this mandate of everybody else is doing this. They must be winning. Their stocks must be going up. We must be behind. Therefore, everybody has to do it, at our company. So I think that dynamic is new. I think it is also a little bit driven less by planning, less by logic, more by reaction. Without trying to sound too judgy about that. But I think, so when we talk about kind of what is the reality on the ground of people who work at these companies that have an AI mandate, it has basically been scrap everything that you were planning to do, redo your entire roadmap. Everything has to have an AI feature. And realistically, if you think too hard or if you push back too much about why whatever you're working on has to have AI injected into it, frankly, that's probably going to go pretty poorly for you, right? Because you have to react more to the fear, right? The fear of missing out of everything has to have AI. We have to be able to tell all of our customers that AI is at the center of everything that we do, more so than the practical reality of, do our customers actually even want this? So it's creating arguably an inversion of the product development process, the product management process, largely speaking, of we're going to think technology first during this time period, not customer first. I think personally that is not going to lead to particularly good products and particularly strong adoption coming out of that. But we're kind of in the midst of that, that hype wave where everything is more marketing and promise than than actual capability. So navigating through that, I think, is a real challenge, not only for executives, right, because they have to manage board expectations, investor expectations, even if they are fully aware of all those dynamics that I just talked about, right? Even if they look at this and they say, gosh, this probably isn't the right thing for us to do to execute such a strong strategic pivot and scrap everything that we've been planning to do and focus on AI, but probably realistically kind of have to do it anyway, just to meet investor and customer expectations during this time period. So doing so in a way that doesn't harm your roadmap, doesn't cost you a ton of money, doesn't cause you to lose a ton of people, right? I think that's honestly one of the more complex challenges for executives of every industry and every size at this time.
You mentioned fear a few times, and I was about to inject fear of missing out. All right.
Yeah.
Acting out of fear, okay, it's a strong driver. How about that? It is really strong driver. Does it work long term? I guess not. Not in life, not in business, right? Not in strategy for sure, right? So while this moment is lasting, all right, fear can be like a good push, but it cannot be your only strategy. It cannot be your only insight that you take, right, as a company leader. So talk to us about what are new possibilities out there, because fear only gets you this far, okay? And you probably will make a lot of mistake, more than you should, more than you would have, right, in any other circumstance. So.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, right? Fear can be a great motivator to get started on something, right? For some subset of companies, I'm sure they were probably too complacent, not investing enough in the future, and AI has come along, and suddenly they've gotten a kick in the pants, and now they are, probably investing a lot more in innovation and thinking about the future than they otherwise would have. So, there's upside to that. There's positivity to the fear in some scenarios, some cases. I think it's really just a question of how far and how long do you let that drive you, right? If it's the impetus that you need to really start thinking about how do we serve our customers better, then fantastic. That's probably healthy fear, right? If it is, we are going to just continuously try to adopt the latest trend without thinking deeply about it. We're just going to, look at whatever, AI chatbot or whatever that our competitors launched and scrap the entire roadmap and try to rebuild that so we are, remain competitive on a feature basis. Then you're probably, letting that fear create a lot of wasted work. You're probably constantly going to be a step behind, and that's probably not going to end too well for companies that adopt that, right? So I think, from arguably a senior level, certainly at an executive level, I think recognizing that you're operating out of fear is step one, call it. That in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing at any given time, but I think it's how do I transition out of that? How do I go from reactionary fear-based, I'm afraid of negative outcome happening to a more positive, proactive approach, which I think really starts with understanding not just where we are today with ChatGPT 5 and current capabilities, but where are we headed? What is likely and unlikely to happen over the near future? And granted, that's a pretty tough task with all the hype machine, roiling around AI. It's a little bit tough, certainly, to understand kind of what is smoke and mirrors, what is reality. So to me, coming from a product management standpoint, I think diving as deeply as you can into the details of how does AI actually work? How do LLMs work? What, do actual third-party studies of these tools say, not just the own OpenAI's marketing department, for example, right? And really trying to understand the fundamental capabilities. And I think if you can do that well enough, what I've seen with some of the companies that I'm working with is you stop reacting to, oh, this ChatGPT 5 came out and now I have to scrap everything and adopt that. And you start thinking more about what can I actually bake this into, at a very fundamental level within my company, the processes, ways of working that we have that can start to not just, slap a little bit of lipstick on whatever pig I have, right? But really start to rethink my core business processes. And when you start to adopt that mentality, that is something that's inherently almost going to take you a lot longer to work on, right? You have to take a longer lens. You cannot be so reactive when you're talking about rebuilding something that is very core to your business, right? So you have to, not only deeply understand what I can use AI for, but what are the, the aspects of, the services that I provide or the products that I build for my customers that if I replace them with AI would actually be enhanced. And it's probably going to be a small subset. It's probably not going to be a chatbot. I'll tell you that. And going through not only the development of how do I put AI at the core of my business, but how do I then subsequently deal with the process changes and the cultural changes that are realistically going to happen when you take something that was probably some amount human based and replace it with AI, and now expect those humans to either react to that system and that capability a little bit differently, or maybe take on completely new tasks. Right? There's a lot of knock-on effects of that approach that realistically in my mind you're probably looking at 6 at minimum to probably 18 months of consistent work to actually embed AI in your company in a way that yields real value, not just some cosmetic value that you can launch very quickly.
Yeah, how does it work, in terms of time frame? You mentioned 6 to 18 months, right?
Yeah,
We all
right.
remember very well-known waterfall models, then agile came on, then, even faster agile, right? Agile on steroids nowadays. How does it work with all the LLMs updates that people finding that one version is completely different and what you thought in your product, right, is delivering one consistent results. Now it's just thrown away. How do you react to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's 2 things to unpack there. So one, right, I just said 6 to 18 months, and every executive, every board member, who might be listening to this went, "Oh my God, that's way too slow," right? But that is realistic. The pace of new model coming out every month and trying to keep up with that as you adapt your business on the fly is just not going to happen, right? And that forces kind of that cosmetic adoption, because I cannot do something that is fundamentally at the core with that much rate of change on the tool that I'm actually using to, to create that change within my business. So we're almost like, because the rate of change is so fast, forced to use and think through superficial adoptions, right? The other angle of this is, I think it highlights the danger of that dynamic, right? If I build my company to leverage the capabilities, the tonality, whatever, of ChatGPT 4, and we buy into kind of the hype train of every AI company out there, that every time we release a model, it only ever gets better in every single way, right? There's no progression of any sort. Everything's just always the same or better. That has proven to not be true, right? Like, we've seen that multiple times with ChatGPT now. Obviously, most recently with ChatGPT 5, where people, very quickly within 48 hours were like, wait a second, all of the customization, all of the interactions that I came to expect from, 4.0, which a lot of people were using, seems to be completely gone in 5. What happened, right? If you think about having built your business around 4.0 and then suddenly a model gets pushed, sorry, you can't use the old service again, you've just screwed your business over, right? So we cannot actually build around the kind of superficial capabilities of these models. You almost are forced to, if you're going to make real change, either directly work with these companies, go work with Anthropic directly, for example, to say, we have a specific need here and I need you to not like monkey with the controls of my business, so like we need to collaborate on this. Or you have to build your own in some way, which is costly, expensive, etc. Or you have to build it in a way that it doesn't matter what the company ends up changing as they roll out new models. It has to be something that is very, very, very core to the AI, to an LLM capability that is not going to change significantly, regardless of what changes they make to the model itself. And that really means that you're kind of peeling back a lot of the flashy capabilities, right? The ability to customize the tone, the ability to answer math questions, whatever it may be, right? And just kind of really going back to the core of I can use this to make predictive assertions based on a healthy data set, right? And that is there's a lot of value to that, but it is not how most companies are really approaching the use of AI right now, right? These AI mandates for the most part are getting expressed at companies in terms of attention grabbing customer facing features like chatbots, like widgets that they can play with, things like that. But all of those are going to be very, very subject to changes from AI companies as they roll out new models. So we're actually kind of exposing ourselves to a lot of customer risk with this approach, which again is very backwards to how the industry has gravitated towards operating the previous 10 years.
On top of that, all right, so it's good that we're unpeeling, okay, changes in LLMs, dependency on things you cannot control, right? So you mentioned some of the tactics, right, how to live with all that, right, that we're dealing with. Question is about product development in risk-averse environments, okay? There are some industries who are more conservative, frankly, right? They mission-critical applications cannot depend not only on latest LLM, they cannot depend on a lot of other things, okay? That's why leaders have to think, right? How to guardrail and how to keep the business running. Yeah, the question is, how do you, what are the tactics? What's the advice?
Yeah, so I mean, I think what I'm seeing, I have a client that very much fits that mold right now, right? Very conservative company, at an enterprise level. And I think, if I can extrapolate from their experience, at least, I think what you're seeing at these companies is there is a realistic fear, right, of exposing their risk, their customer experience to AI, which I think is probably a healthy fear, right? Particularly given the industries that a lot of these companies are in. So they're not really investing in these, the chatbots, the customer facing things because of that. But there's still an AI mandate, right? They still feel the need, they still feel the pressure to implement these things. And the way that seems to get really expressed is internal tooling, right? We're going to force, or let's soften that a little bit, maybe. Provide tools that we can, incentivize our employees to adopt that do very much rely on AI, and it's kind of just the same, thing that you're seeing at a lot of the less risk averse companies, just applied internally, which means basically, we're building chatbots, we're building predictive tools, we're building things that at their core really fundamentally are time saving initiatives. And I think this relates very strongly to there was a report that came out, I think it was last week, that basically said, if I'm remembering the number correctly, something like 95% of AI initiatives at large companies are failing, right? And failing was defined as basically no meaningful financial impact has been derived or observed from them. And I think that dynamic that I just described, to me, is the explanation as to why, right? If all you're doing with the AI is saving me as a corporate employee time, I'm probably going to find other ways to use that time, right? It's kind of a little bit of a, I call it a capitalist myth, right? That if I save 5 minutes out of my day, I'm going to use that 5 minutes to create more shareholder value, right? I'm probably just going to, take a 5-minute water break or whatever, right? Particularly with the pressure that a lot of these AI mandates are creating, I don't know that those time savings are necessarily, translating into productivity gains or real monetary costs, other than from laying people off, which just then creates a dynamic that puts even more pressure on the individuals that remain, right? So I think if we're going to get this right, it doesn't really matter if you're kind of risk averse or if you are very tolerant of risk, right? The dynamics still kind of are fundamentally the same across all types of companies, right? Which is, if all we're doing is kind of putting this at the the edge of our business, if I can steal a term, right? Actually, I have a book here, which I'll plug briefly. The author of this book has kind of talked about AI at the core versus AI at the edge, right? AI at the core being we really rethink our business processes, as I was talking about earlier, versus AI at the edge being we just keep everything the same and put an AI veneer on the end of it. It really doesn't matter if you're doing that from a customer facing perspective or an internal facing perspective or some mix of the two. If we're doing everything that we assume that the core of our business remains exactly the same and we're just putting an AI layer on it, I think all of those things are ultimately doomed to either not really have that much customer impact or internal user impact, or frankly fail, right? Because it is just too subject to changes. It is too fragile in the sense that I can't guarantee that I'm actually going to get those productivity gains. I can only assume, right? A lot of those things really are going to inhibit the actual value that has been promised from AI, that people are expecting from AI.
Let's turn to some success stories. I'm sure in your career, right?
Yeah.
You did see successful projects. We don't need client names. We don't need project details. What we want is really the environment that the organization was on, hopefully, right? And then what are the gains? What are the, not necessarily productivity gains, any other value? Okay. Could you bring up some examples, please? Yeah.
And we're looking for specifically AI related examples.
If you wish, yes, technology in general, just, some successful implementation that really people, the feeling, right? When things going right, when organization sees the results, when again, mood and enthusiasm is up, we want those kind of examples. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So I'll give you a non-AI related example, but I think, it kind of really speaks to the principles of what I'm talking about, right? Of needing to very much understand your customer needs and not building something that is, in this case, as I'll get to, really anything, right? But rather addressing that need directly. So the example that I'm happy to share here is working at an insurance company. We were selling various different types of insurance, that you as an individual might need, right? So everything from Medicare to life insurance, all the way down to car and home insurance, right? And one of the challenges for the business was it was very high volume, rapid transaction based, right? So the way that the company succeeded and made money was basically trying to get as many potential customers onto the phone as possible, make the sales pitch, and very high churn, low conversion, but ultimately, a very fast growing company, leveraging that strategy. But one of the things that we, as a consumer experience product team, started to observe was a very, not only, kind of a low conversion rate of those phone sales, but a low rate of those policies becoming not only in effect, right? So a customer actually starting to make their first payments on the policies, but then choosing to maintain and continue that policy over time, right? And so, we started out as I think, broadly speaking, all product teams probably should, with doing some deep research on what are our customers actually doing, right? So we had a very rich data set that we could leverage initially, and we started to look at that in a very exploratory manner. One of the things that we kind of stumbled onto, frankly, was that we were kind of looking at our traditional funnel, right, which starts from first contact all the way through successful sale, and we started to look at what happened after that, right? And what we started to observe was customers were sold a policy, and then immediately started reshopping, right? And you're thinking about that, like, why would I, in any other context, I go to the store, I buy a hammer, and I'm like, no, I'm going to go back to the store and buy another hammer, right? It made no sense initially. So we started to say, okay, we need to learn, understand more about why that dynamic's happening. It involved our UX research team. They went out and talked to a bunch of customers. And what we started to hear consistently from customers was that process went too quickly, effectively. I felt that it was a high pressure sale. I did not feel like I actually understood, what I was buying. Felt okay enough to, say yes on the phone, but hung up, and then 5 minutes later I was like, what did I just do? And and that was really kind of the fundamental cause of why they then went back onto the site or went somewhere else and started to effectively restart their entire journey shopping for that policy from scratch again. So what we realized was, this was actually at its core a trust, a trust issue to some extent, right? We had not built up enough customer trust for them to actually take the advice that we were giving, even though it was, certainly from our internal standards, advice that we were very confident in most cases, right? Because we'd built up a lot of proprietary technology to understand what is the right policy for you, right? And so we were giving accurate recommendations, but the customer just didn't believe us at the end of the day. So in this case, as I said at the beginning, what we ultimately built here was kind of nothing. We realized we needed to address not the capabilities of the company, right? Because our recommendations were good. We needed to address how they were delivered and how we really gained that customer trust. So there were kind of two tweaks that went into place. One was some initiatives to try to let's call it soften the sales cycle a little bit, make it a little bit less of a hard sale, so that customers were kind of brought along for that journey rather than feeling like they're pushed into it. And a lot of those initiatives kind of collectively demonstrated a ton of improvement in the policy effectuation and retention rate in and of themselves. The second thing that we did was it initially kind of started out as a test, but turned out to be a very successful solution in and of itself that did not really need a lot of technological innovation or build around it, which was we simply started to follow up with customers a couple days after selling them a policy, right? To say, we're here for you, right? We kind of thought about it internally as your roadside assistance policy, right? We just sold you a car. Hopefully it doesn't break down, but if it does, we're here, right? If you have questions, we're here. And just that checkpoint really had a material impact on, again, the policy effectuation and retention rates, because again, looping back to check in with customers about that change, how they felt about it, with our UX research team, what we learned was they didn't always know customers didn't always know what they didn't know. They just had this kind of vague sense of, did I buy the right thing? I'm not sure. And so just having somebody check in with them proactively to say, how are you doing? Do you have questions? Kind of alleviated a lot of that anxiety for them, right? So it was, okay, I may not know everything. I may not, be 100% certain, but I at least know that they've got my back and they're here for me if something bad does happen. So, most customers felt a lot better about proceeding in that environment. So I think to me that is I gravitate towards examples like that because as a technology executive, as a product management executive, it's very easy to get caught in the trap of everything I do has to leverage technology in some way. Everything I do has to, leverage AI in some way, for example. And a lot of the time, the simplest explanations, the simplest solutions, and the things that, truly actually have impact for your customers have almost nothing to do with technology, right? Really, we're just trying to figure out what do you need? How do I deliver it to you? And how do I do that in a way that works for our business? And, often you stumble on solutions like this that are just very human, very simple, but still very impactful.
There's so much to draw, Brian, from this example that you're describing, okay? Everyone who is listening to us, I encourage to follow Brian Root on LinkedIn. I'm a huge fan, okay? And those tried and true experiences and pains and struggles, okay, that comes from real world, they're really invaluable because what you described right now, right, that when we're looking for the Band-Aid, new technology, new shiny toy, look how great my customer experience gonna be, but the actual pain point is not where, again, people applying a lot of those Band-Aids. So this story just resonated with me. I'm sure people find it helpful. So look at the problem at the very beginning, maybe like the simple mundane step, right? That what you're describing, Brian, just customers don't trust enough. They agree. Those customers can be tricky. They agree, they buy, and then they put your product on the shelf, okay? I've seen it happening over and over at enterprise sales, okay? And the metrics that we're coming after, right? What's the usage? How customers adapt our technology? And the result is zero. That's such a horrible place to be in. So, Brian, thank you so very much for this story. This has so many, again, so many insights and just helpful ways to think about, right, the business of technology. How about disasters? All right. I need to ask you, all right, some project that went wrong, AI, please, maybe not AI, but something that people missed altogether, and how to avoid some of these pitfalls.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll give you another example that again, not AI specific, but I think it has a lot of application to certainly to AI, how AI is used, should be used, right? So actually, same company, ironically, right? We had a gigantic marketing engine, call it, that drove a lot of traffic to the website, and ultimately fed the machine of needing to get all those people onto the phone in order to sell them policies, that I described. And I think rightly so, the company thought of itself and really operated as a extremely data-driven company, right? I would certainly corroborate from my own experience. We looked at a ton of metrics. We pulled a lot of data. I think where things started to become very confusing for us, kind of at a broad corporate level, was that a lot of the data that was being shared by the marketing team did not really sync up with a lot of the data that was being observed by, let's call it the sales team and the operational side of the business, right? So we had, a lot of indications, let's call them, that we're driving a ton of traffic. That traffic should be high quality. Whereas, why is that not materializing, right, on the sales side, which I think is, probably a common problem that a lot of companies struggle with, right? What it really boiled down to was that we had to kind of go through multiple layers of peeling back the onion, because at the surface level, the reports just didn't, internally, like, each report looked accurate. The reports themselves just didn't agree, right? So we had to dive down. Okay, where's that data coming from? Where's it coming from? And what we found, at a fairly superficial level, we kind of knew this already, but they were coming from two different sources, right? The internal operational data was coming from, kind of one source of truth for how customers actually interacted with us on the phone and bought their policies, et cetera. The other was coming from a completely different database that related only to marketing activities, right? So clearly there was some difference between the two. What we found was, when we really dove down into, literally had to go to pretty much the definitional level. How are these metrics calculated? Where is this, not just the aggregated data, but the individual data points coming from? We started to find a lot of aspects of the marketing data that, I think, right or wrong is a little bit too probably black and white for this conversation, but things that were inconsistent, let's say, between how certain definitions were considered across, the two different data sources, which explained a lot of the, the misattribution, the lack of alignment itself, but also, aspects of our marketing system that had been set up in ways that probably made sense 6 to 8 years ago, and then we glossed over those definitions and forgot, how things were set up. And now fast forward into the future, and we assumed that the data was reflecting what we thought it was, but it turned out that it actually was not. It was telling us different information than the way we're defining it in the reports, right? So there were a lot of things that we actually needed to go back and change about how we filtered out traffic, how we, considered customers to, have qualified for passing a certain threshold, within our process or not, right? This was mind-numbing work, right? We're talking about probably 6 months of diving into, where does that data come from? What does that exactly mean? Okay, let's verify that, in triplicate to make sure that we're not getting it wrong, right? This was not sexy. This was not fun. But we learned a lot from it, and we're able to, to really identify the aspects of, each reporting system that were creating broad operational challenges and confusion for the entire company, right? So I think if I look at this story from the lens of AI, the fundamental data, the data quality, is the thing that is going to allow you to actually get value out of AI. If you're anywhere close to the situation I just described, where you haven't looked at your data set critically for 6 years or whatever, or you don't really know how all of this data is defined and segmented and stored in your database, and you just slap some AI over it, you could just be turbocharging the wrong things, right? It's like I'm taking bad data and just making it really bad really fast, which I don't think I need to say is not going to go well, right, for your company, right? So I think smart companies are investing a ton of time into this unsexy, this is going to be a slog through 6 to 12 months of cleaning our data, but they are going to accelerate so fast after going through that process, coming out of it, that really when you zoom out and look at it from a macro standpoint, that is the long-term acceleration strategy, not adopt everything as quickly as possible now and pray that our data quality is good, but make sure the data quality is good, and then you are poised to take advantage of anything that comes along, right? After that happens.
Fantastic. Wow, time is flying in good company, Brian. Thank you so very much. There's so many tangible results from this conversation. Okay. I'm learning a lot. I'm sure people in the audience learning a lot about it. Question in conclusion. All right. What about one AI mandate change that every leader, executive in position with people, with budget, with mission, right? One AI related mandate that you would impose on people?
Yeah, gosh, if I could change that, I mean, I think it would be maybe one high level change with a lot of kind of implications of it, right? But fundamentally, don't push for speed on this, push for quality, right? The thing that we can implement today or tomorrow, that's just kind of an off the shelf solution. It's probably not going to have much value because, again, have we done the work to make sure the data quality is good? Have we actually thought about how do we, really inject this into the core business capabilities to address an actual user need, et cetera? All the things I've talked about, right? You probably are zooming through all of those things and glossing over them if the objective is to launch something as quickly as possible. But I think it also speaks to we're all learning like what AI is even capable of in real time, right? So expecting your team to become experts while building and driving a huge impact in such a short period of time probably isn't realistic, right? So I think the implication of it to me is zoom out the time frame, say we want to have something that is really going to drive impact, not tomorrow, not this quarter. It's not going to look good for the board. We're not going to win any awards for this, but we're actually going to drive real impact. So that requires us to deeply understand the technology, deeply understand probably our data, how it can actually enable the technology, deeply understand our customer need, and that has always been the case, deeply understand our business capability, that has always been the case, right? But really diving into the intersection of these things and doing that really well is going to take time. And so I think your view, your mandate almost as a executive is give your people that shelter, give them the time, the space, the capabilities that they need to actually execute well, right? Because in the long term, that will make you look good too, right? They will appreciate working for you. They will actually drive real impact. You will look good because of all of that. It's gonna, I think, this is obviously my personal bias, but I think that is going to yield everybody involved a much better result than AI now, right? So try to slow down with intentionality to allow people to really understand how to use the technology properly, not just quickly.
Thank you, Brian, for joining me today. Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, appreciate it. Pleasure being here.